if you're investing.
Investors will.
The podcast for all things real estate investing.
Mark, it's great having you with us today, and thanks again for joining this episode of Investor One on One, where we talk with top industry leaders from across the country. For those tuning in, Mark is a seasoned real estate investor and the founder of Festival Properties, a dynamic company that's making waves in the Chicago real estate market. Can you share a bit about your background, Festival Properties, and what inspired you to get into real estate investing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been investing for like 15 years. I got started in the Chicago market. I'm in the Chicago market. What kind of got me into it was, just the itch that kind of everyone has when it comes to wealth accumulation and, the last frontier real estate where, you can make it with, knowing simple. It's not too complex. You got to understand simple characteristics of property and whatnot. So that's what kind of got me into real estate, just for wealth creation. And when I got into it, was kind of before, wholesaling was big. 2010, 2011. And for me, I started actually putting out bandit signs, and that's how I got my first couple deals. Actually, was from bandit signs. I think at the time I was feeling, I read Think and Grow Rich, and so that kind of gets you amped up. And so, I didn't. I mean, this is like I said, 2010. It was, so I bought 1,000 stakes and 1,000 signs, and I manually wrote, Mark and I will, or Mark will buy your house, I'll buy your house. Smith, I tested a bunch of different messages, but anyway, so with the stakes, with the signs, put them up, everywhere. I mean, at the time, I remember I was with my girlfriend, which is my now wife. So I had, another business I was doing during the day, and then hung out with her for a couple hours, about 8, 9 o'clock. Then I would go to work from 9 o'clock till 2 or 3 in the morning, writing the signs, reading, putting up the signs. I felt like, at night, putting up the signs was a good time. Till like 2 or 3 in the morning. And that happened for a while, right? So like those, I was younger, I had more energy. And so, you didn't need that much sleep. And so that's how I got my start basically is, I will say at that time too, there wasn't like, you can almost go online now and find out A to Z how to close a deal, how to find the seller, how to get it under contract, how to submit it to a title company. That wasn't around, 15 years ago. You just kind of had to, unless you paid for the information or you knew someone that was doing it, or like me, I just kind of figured it out through like just making errors. You just mess up, you lose the deal, it hurts, it stings real bad. But like, I'll give you an example too. When I had a deal, it was a cheap deal too. I got it for like 13,000. It's probably like a $250,000 house. Wholesaled it to this buyer for 19,000, which is still a great deal. I probably could have sold it for more, but I just kind of wanted to get the deal. So submitted it to the title company and just assumed that they would do all the work that's needed. So I remember I was on vacation, I think, with my wife. We already scheduled something to go to like Dominican. So like I call the title agency, or the seller calls me. He's like, I'm gonna contact the IRS and this is a scam. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Call the title company. I'm like, hey, what happened? Did this not close? Like, I didn't follow up one time with the title company. I just assumed they would do what's needed, right? But turns out this was like in a city that, they needed to do like a city inspection, village inspection kind of thing, which wasn't done. And, there's other paperwork and just all kinds of stuff. And honestly, it's my fault for not, following up with the city, with the attorney to make sure that everything happened. And so that was a stinger because that was a cheap, like a good deal, cheap deal. And I felt bad for the seller because I legit just didn't know, right? And he thought I was a scammer, and it was awful. While you're like sipping a Mai Tai, right? And you're trying to enjoy it, and then this happens, you're like, man. So yeah. So the point being, like, I think it's easier now because everything's out there. It's actually really easy. Like back then, starting out, you just literally had to mess up at every step of the way, and then you get stinged, and you're like, all right, now I know not to do this. And so that's how I kind of got my start, is had the itch to get wealthy, knew I would. So I knew my mindset was like at a 10 for sure. I had, the other good thing is I at the time, my group of friends probably weren't the best, but I still kind of separated myself from them. And let's say if they're operating at a 5, I saw the vision of operating at a 10, and no matter what happened, no matter what, like I knew I was going to make it, so I think that's super important. But that's how I got my start. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's very inspiring. And I talk to a lot of investors, and I feel like mindset and failing is a big part of every successful investor that I talk to. So thank you for sharing. On to our next
Definitely.
question. Your business operates in Chicago. So the Midwest over the years has been developing like crazy. How do you determine which areas in Chicago are best for your investment? And what key factors, red flags, or property types do you focus on when looking to invest?
So a couple of things there. I think like there's a lot of there's no right or wrong answer, I feel, with this. And so, like for me personally, with what I'm looking for to invest might be different for other people. So I think, like, to answer that question, the important questions to ask yourself would be, what's my goal? What's my involvement? Do I want to wholesale? Do I want to fix and flip short term? Do I want to hold on long term? Right? Because based on those answers, it'll be different. So let's say if you're just looking to wholesale, honestly, it doesn't matter, right? If you go top end, super top end, middle, total, C and D class. The point there is, as long as you get a good deal that someone else wants to buy for more than you have it under contract for, then I think it's a good deal, right? Then it could be a good deal. Um, so I think what gives you confidence for sure is starting backwards, not backwards, but starting with the end goal in mind first. Meaning, so if you're looking to wholesale, then you want to at least talk to like 10 buyers and see where they're buying and what price point they're buying and what area they're buying. Asking them, hey, tell me about the last deal or the current deal that you're doing. Tell me about that. What did the numbers look like? Where'd you buy it? How did it look? Would you be interested in the same price, less, more? Well, obviously less, but would you pay a little bit more? Just curious. So you're almost interviewing buyers, right? So
Mhm.
starting there, I think, because then that gives you the confidence. You know what? I'm talking to the seller. I know my buddy, my buyer, Bill, said he would pay 50,000 in this zip code in this city. So now I know when I talk to the seller, it's a deal if I can get it at 40, 45, whatever it is, right? So and so that doesn't matter where it is, right? That could be super top end or super low end, right? Um, so I think that's important to note. If you're doing a fix and flip, I think it's important to check, okay, let's look at the areas that are growing, that are selling quick after you rehab it, right? Because going from A to Z rehabbing a property can be very trying, very challenging, right? A lot of things go wrong. A lot of things usually do go wrong. And so the challenge is when you do all that and then you feel like, oh, I'm at the finish line. I got pictures, everything's good, we're listed. And then it takes 6 months to sell. That's no fun, right? So I think you got to make sure you're in an area where things are moving quick, right? People want to live there. It's safe, right? And so I think that's a very important consideration. Not just like, if you get a deal at 20,000 in a DE area, but there's break-ins and no one wants to buy it, or even worse, right? Buyers do want to buy it, but then they can't get financing for it, and then you're back to square one, and then it's like a 9 month project just in trying to get it sold, right, and getting buyers qualified. So that answers that one. And then I think for long term, there's different considerations there too. Are you like a growth or value or a cash flow investor or a hybrid of all three, right? So I think what I look at is I've got these preferred areas in Chicago that are safe, blue chip kind of areas. I'm talking like a blue chip stock, safe, dividend producing, just a safe areas that will hold long term. And of course, you want to make cash flow, right? The goal is to have cash flow. A little more challenging now with the interest rates than it has been before. So that's why I think that the better areas, because you look at a pro forma on any multifamily, and the numbers are always going to be worse than what it says it's going to be, right? So you got to prepare for that and make sure it's in a good area, and that where you can bump the rents up, right? And so I think there you got to be more strategic. When you're wholesaling, it doesn't matter where the property is. You could just look at a map of all Chicago, and honestly, it doesn't matter as long as you have a buyer for it. What does it matter?
For sure.
But like on buy and hold, if you're going to hold it long term, you want to make sure that it's at least gentrifying, or if not, you just have a good, either you're a good manager or you have a good property manager or resources in that area right? So there's no right or wrong too, just because it's a bad area or a D area. But let's say you've got a really good contractor, a really good, someone that can check on the property every day that you trust, then it's, I would say that's a great consideration. I would even focus on that, right? So you just got to like kind of determine, go inside and see, all right, who do I know who can really help me with this?
That's some great tips. Now talking about the Chicago market, it's a very competitive market, I would say. What are your top strategies for finding motivated sellers in Chicago for your business?
So for Chicago, yeah, I mean, so like I've gone through the gamut, right? This is 15 years, and sometimes it ebbs and flows, right? Like at this point, I feel like referrals have been really good from past deals that I've done the last 15 years. Like I have an autoresponder of past sellers, past clients that I've bought from, and then I just keep kind of sending them an email every month. Hey, how's it going? I bought your house 5 years ago. Blah blah blah. You have a neighbor or a friend that's looking to sell, and so that actually works really well. That does take a little bit of time, right? Obviously, because you got to get some history there. Um, Reviews. I'm big on reviews. So if I buy a property, I'll have the seller leave a review, and then I use that on my Google My Business page, and so that helps too. Just kind of like marketing your Google My Business page. Um, Online leads, what you guys do, I think, are great as a supplement. Throwing those in, they're great leads where they're very targeted, right? So you can kind of target what area, what county, and I think with that, it's just a numbers game, right? So I think with that helps to be also licensed, so you can the deals, the sellers that want like retail price and no chance of them wanting a wholesale price, then I think you got to maybe opt for trying to do a referral agreement on those. Um, I haven't done direct mail in a while. I know it still works. Buddies still do it. That say that it works, especially if you drip. And then lists. So we'll purchase lists with motivation, either high equity. Those have been working good. So free and clear, high equity lists, and then targeted areas that I like to buy, that I like to buy personally, or that I have buyers that I know would like to buy there. Um, and so I think those have been working really well. And then we just do, whether it's a text blast or a voicemail blast to those. So those have been working really well.
Amazing. Those are some really good strategies. And I saw that you started the first two strategies you said were a lot of referrals and testimonials, and that has to do with trust. And as you know, in real estate, trust is everything. Something we're doing now is we recently updated our platform so that when a seller enters their home information, they instantly know which investor will be calling them. How do you approach conversations with home sellers to make people feel comfortable and confident in working with you?
Yeah, so that's super important these days. Pretty much everything, right? And I'll tell you this too. I've done work with like foreclosures, pre-foreclosures too, the last 15 years. And so, I think it's always in like getting into the psyche of the seller, of their mindset, right? So like in that situation, pre-foreclosure, right? They're like, everyone who's contacting them is a creditor, like, hey, you owe us your payment on the car, on the house. And so I think they tend to not pick up the phone and not respond as much, and if
Exactly.
they do, it's very defensive, right? So the number one goal right away is to really just try to be, super approachable, but then also to kind of let their guard down a little bit. You want to kind of just like ease into it and just like, hey, Mr. Seller, man, I'm Mark. I'm here to help. Not calling about collecting any money. I'm just curious if I can help you regarding your foreclosure. So whether it's, whatever the conversation is, disarming is what you want to be, right? So it's like, if it's one of your leads, hey, I know you just inquired online about looking at selling your property. Just curious, just kind of reaching out. My name is Mark. I'm a licensed agent. I've been doing this 20 years. Um, I've bought over 1,000 houses, so I've helped sellers just like you over 1,000 times. So I'm here to help. But tell me about your situation. What's going on, right? So like in that quick 20 seconds, I basically told them that I'm a licensed agent, told them that I've been doing this 20 years, right? Because right away they're thinking like, who is this person? Can I trust him? And like, can he help me, right? Can he buy my house? So I think you want to squash those objections right away, right? So what I do is just kind of introduce myself, but also be disarming, right? So it's like, hey, I'm just inquiring. I'm just a person like you. I've helped 1,000 of you, people just like you in your situation. Been doing this a while. I can send you a link to my reviews. Please read those. And but let's get back to you though, Mr. Seller. What is it that you need and how can I help? Right. So like you're really just saying, I'm able, I'm disarming. I've been doing this over 1,000 times. Now let's talk about your situation. So right away they're like, all right, so this person is real. He's been doing it a while. He's helped out 1,000 people just like me. All right, I guess I can, that's not to say they're going to open up and tell you everything, give you everything, but like it's a start, right? Where they're like, okay, I can have a conversation. So I think that's super important before you even start talking about like, well, tell me about the property, how many, but you got to really, I'm a real person. I'm not like a robot. I'm not an Autobot, right? Because people are thinking like, oh my God, is this some AI trying to steal my info, right? Is this, like I just had my info stolen last month. Is this person trying to do that? Like, no, Mr. Seller, I'm like, I'm an investor. I'm an agent. Here are my reviews, right? So I think that's super important to get that out of the way, as quickly as possible, and then moving on to it's all about them, because that's what it is, right? You're a solution provider, So it's tell me about your situation, Yeah.
That's some amazing advice. So, in the start of our conversation, you were talking about how you started, and it's very inspiring. And I feel like you've been in the industry for so long that you probably have some really cool stories. Can you share at least one story of your most memorable deal? Maybe one that challenged you or taught you a valuable lesson?
Um, a challenging story. I mean, there's so many. I'm gonna have to try to think of one. I mean, there's just, just with like family issues. Yeah, I'll tell. There is this one. I mean, sometimes it's a patience game, and
Mhm.
like being a psychologist game. So I was doing this deal. This was a while ago, but close to when I was starting out, within like 3 years, and so it was like 5 or 6 brothers, I forget, right? And so their parents died, and they were selling the house, and so they all had to agree and in principle and in contract to sign, right? And so the back and forth on this was insane, right? So here's the thing too, is like, you think seller inquires or you find a seller and they're ready to go right away. It's not like that. A lot of it's follow up, right? So you got to be energetic and helpful at first with everything so you're memorable. But then in addition, you're 1 out of 100 you're going to get right away. You basically got to drip, drip, drip. So anyway, these brothers, I was probably talking to them for like 9 months to a year from when they initially inquired, right? And I think it was from a sign, actually, abandoned sign. So, I mean, like combative too. Like one of the main, I think was it the executor? Maybe the executor. Super combative, right? Like just one of those that like, life has given it to him, right? And so he just tries to take it out on everyone, just mean and cruel and all this stuff. And, just mean to his brothers and mean to whoever he's talking to. So it's like, you got to take a different approach and like, just listen, just listen. So I'm just listening to him bitch and moan and complain, whatever, right? And this goes on for a while, right? He just keeps on complaining. And it's like, it's easy to be like, man, I'll just move on to the next deal, right? But I felt like it was a good enough deal where it would make sense, and I can get it cheap enough and there's profit on there. And so then I would have to talk to him, had to get the info for the other brothers. Some of them were easy to deal with, some weren't, right? But I literally had to talk with all of them, try to do a conference call, but they hate each other. So I couldn't do that. That didn't make sense because then they all just start yelling at each other, which would be more efficient to just do, a conference call. So then I had to call each of them separately, obviously hear their gripes about this guy or that guy, but at the same time, like, with the goal of we're moving this to the table, like we're moving forward, we're moving the needle, whatever it takes. So probably 50 conversations, right? Sometimes like, so people think it's easy, right? No, like that took a lot of conversations, at least 50 of, nurturing, listening, and then moving the needle. And so finally, we got them all to agree, and then we got them all to agree. Then they didn't want to perform. They tried to back out, of the contract. And this is before I, knew that you can record a lien on the contract, right? So I'm like, oh my God, all this work, and now they want to back out. But I was stern. I said, absolutely not. It's not gonna, whatever his name, Brian. It's not Brian, but let's call him Brian. We're not backing out, Brian. We've committed. You've committed. We've already got this with the attorney. Whatever it takes. What's missing? We got to make this happen, right? And I forgot what it was, but he was just like, "Oh, I just want to make sure that we can close on this day or something." Okay, we'll make sure that we can close on this day, and that you can get your check first before the other brothers, right? Because he wanted to get his first. So whatever, that was important to him. And so, so then more, so like it took, I'm telling you, from initial contract, it still took like 3 to 4 months of like just nurturing, pushing it, moving the needle. And so I think patience and having those conversations and listening. A lot of the time now, people are like microwave society. Oh, I just want to press a button and it's ready. Sometimes it's slow, long, grueling, and painful, but you got to just keep pushing. So a lot of stories like that. I think the end goal in mind and always looking to help and but move the conversation, move the needle forward.
That's a great story. What I got from this is, patience is everything, especially in this industry. And a lot of people don't have patience these days. So if you can have that, you will succeed more than others. And the other thing I feel like that I got from the story is that some people just want to be heard. You know what I mean? Even if it's for the silliest thing, if you can meet that exact point, then, you're going to be ahead of others. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and
And
then real quick, like when you have coffee or whatever, like when you're getting your day started, instead of thinking what I want to do, what are my goals, especially in this space, it's if you're talking to sellers, right? It's like, all right, time to get out of my head and who can I help today? I'm ready to, you know what I
exactly.
mean? So I'm talking to seller, how can I help you? Very consultative based. How can I help, right? So like that mentality helps.
Amazing. So just like we spoke about this industry, there's a lot of success. You see all these gurus, you see a lot of money being made, but with all the success, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of headaches, a lot of stress. How do you overcome this kind of stress and challenges in this industry?
Yeah, that's just like with anything. I think you got to have a positive release, whatever that is, right? Center yourself, whatever you do, to work out, take care of yourself, eat good, meditation, breathing. Like you just got to find what works for you and do that and just take a break and center yourself. But then also you got to think long term, right? So like I think you can't get caught up in the short term. Um, misgivings or challenges. I mean, they're tough and you got to deal with them head on. But like at the same time, you really got to look like zoom out, right? So like when you're going through a challenge, just zoom out like bird's eye view, like, okay, you know what? The long term goal is this. So like even if this deal falls apart or doesn't or it aggravates me, like I'll be okay. Let me just attack it with the zest that I can and try to push it forward and make it happen for both sides. But if not, man, it's okay. Long term goal is prevails, right? Like I'm not gonna. There's not one deal that's gonna make or break me, right? And so it's like that mentality, or like even if I really really want this deal, I can always go on to the next. So I think the key, what really helps is like you want to control the input as much as you can. So in other words, you do want to, it's like the four agreements. You want to try absolutely as hard as you can and do everything within your power to do everything that you can to make, to create a win-win, right? And then in some ways, kind of surrender to the output of like, well, what's going to happen is going to happen. I mean, you still got to, whatever it takes, you got to push through. But like, I notice for me, the times that I get most disappointed is when I have the most expectations, of what I want to happen versus like what's going to happen, right? And so I think but it's super important at the same time to make sure that you do everything you can in your power, right? So that you kind of like, man, I left it on the table. Whatever happens, happens. And so, I think that's an important part of this business because there's a lot of investors I've talked to in my 15 years, and a lot of them I think aren't as successful as they can be because of that trait, not because the leads are bad or they don't have enough leads or whatever, but it's literally just like it's just like facing rejection. You hear 85 no's and you're still enthusiastic about the 86th, It's like Barbara Corcoran had such a, from Shark Tank, she had such a, I forgot what it was, but it was something like, my best entrepreneurs are always the ones that, get knocked down and then they get up with unbelievable enthusiasm and zest for the next conversation, deal, whatever, blah, blah. It's almost like they're stupid. Not just, she's kind of said it in jest. It's almost like, she's like, man, you just keep hitting me and I just keep getting up and I'm happier. Like, what, are you stupid? What's wrong with you? Like, but seriously though, it's like you get knocked down, you get up and you're just like, man, I'm ready to go again. Let's go. I think that's the most important trait, to keep it going. So however you can cultivate that would be ideal.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. So well said. You were talking about long term. Where do you see the real estate market heading in the next few years? And how is Festival Properties preparing for those changes?
Yeah, man, it'd be nice to have a crystal ball. I don't know. I typically think with like with all the future forecasts, what everyone always thinks, it's probably going to be maybe not opposite, but maybe not as much as what people always think, right, of what's going to happen. So I don't know. I still think rates won't go down that much. They'll probably be between 6 and 7. But that's, like, I don't know. What if there's other geopolitical factors, and if those things happen, who knows what can happen, right? If you just look at real estate supply and demand, generally, I mean, there still is like a supply shortage, right? So I think no matter what, that's why you see in every market, prices still keep going up because there is a supply shortage. Other than like, downtown Austin condo market, maybe oversaturated, overbuilt for now, but that can stabilize too. But I think, it's all about, if you're buying for the long term, you just want to make sure you're buying in an area where there's in migration, where more people are moving in than moving out, and just being conscious of, because so like for example in Austin, Austin, I think from the research I've done lately is it's kind of settled a little bit, right? The prices and the rents have not gone up. Some have actually gone down. I looked at some, and I just looked at some of the listings. They're a little stale and they keep going down and reducing. But do I think Austin's a good investment for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Absolutely. People are going to keep moving there, right? And so, now is probably a good time to buy if you can get a decent deal in Austin, right? So I think when I look at buying, um, for long term, you always want to look at like, all right, it's tougher to cash flow now for sure, but you can still find good deals that can cash flow, just maybe less than before, but they're still out there. And now I feel like it's a really good season the last 2 years of dialing in your operations then, right? So like checking all your insurance quotes, um, reducing the taxes as much as you can, doing agreements with all the utility companies and just wherever you can. I feel like the operations side, diving into that will help you. So then when, the rents start to climb a lot further, you got your, everything's in place already. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. I don't know what's going to happen. Like I said, I would think between still 6 and 7, depending on like what the new inflation numbers come in. But I will say that just lately, the project managers, contractors I've talked to, on like local levels, they're super optimistic, charged up, right? And so like some of the contractors I talked to, they're like, I had a couple investors that have been on the sidelines. Now they're ready to commit to start rehabbing these properties. So that's good because I feel like, that's like, to me, that's a leading economic indicator, right? Because it's, that's what starts everything, right? People are optimistic again. They're doing deals. They're rehabbing the properties, so general optimism.
I like what you said about Austin. I also saw that the prices are dropping right now, but because it's a potential in the long term, it's definitely going to go up. It's like a good stock that everyone's buying in it, and eventually has to like have a little dip, and then it continues to fly up. So
Yeah.
that's really well said. Do you see any other cities in the States that have as good of potential as Austin that is worth looking at to invest and for the long
As far
term?
as long term, yeah, I think you always want to look like the in migration, right? So Dallas, it's still gangbusters here. Even though if it like same thing. I mean, Dallas had adjusted to prices and rents, but there's still like every day there's a new giant headquarters moving here. People moving here by the busload, and so Dallas is still great long term, right? Houston, Austin, Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, Columbia, Charleston, South Carolina. Florida, I don't know, right? Florida, I feel like it's a lot of people have moved in. Now they got their insurance crisis. I think they got a battle figure out. So but I still think like Tampa and Miami, that's still going to be okay long term. People still want to be in the sun. But at the same time, like even some Midwest cities, like Chicago, interesting market because it's a super mature market, has some, fiscal responsibility issues that I think drives people out. But like there's still a lot of people that it's still a huge city. People still want to live there, especially if they have families. They want to live close to their family. Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland. And so I think, there's still good markets there too that the houses were cheap. I don't want to say cheap, but cheaper compared to other markets. And so I think people now too are conscious of like, well, I do have family in Cleveland and housing is much cheaper there than it is in North Carolina. So, maybe we can move back there. So, I think that that's a factor too, being closer to family. Um, yeah, but it's always following in migration.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing. So coming into our last questions, those starting out in real estate or even our seasoned investors, what's one personal piece of advice that you would like to give them?
Um, become battle tested. So hope that you go through a challenging situation or a time or a season, because you need those, because that's what kind of, when times are good, like if someone got into this in late 2021, right? Like, oh my God, this business is easy, you know, versus like, 22 when the rates started going up, 23. Those were challenging years. A lot of friends that I talked to, me personally, I mean, they were very tough years, late 22, 23 especially, parts of 24, where like those were challenging years. And so you got to go through that, you know, to build that resolve, because if, so the point is, like, if everything's going easy, that you're not going to learn as much from that, you just want to keep it going. Right. But I forgot one of the realtors out west, the guy that has his own show, the Maurice, whatever, Mansky, I think, the agency guy, the founder, he had a good quote. He's like, you don't make any money in a downturn, in a recession, but you build skills, you build resolve, you build your team, you build your operations. And then when the market goes up, that's when you make your money. Right. So he's like, but you're battling in the bunker that whole time. So, for someone starting out and they think it's not easy, right? That's okay. That's good. That's better than if it was easy, because remember, if you can make it through to the other side and build the resolve and the skills, and making the 100 contacts a day, it's just a numbers game. You got to remove the emotion out of it and just make the calls. Honestly, you don't even need a fancy CRM starting out. Call buyers, call sellers, have conversations, get unconsciously competent and having these conversations, and just build yourself, build your skills, so then on, when things get really good, you're ready to capitalize. Right. So dribble the ball. Right. We always talk about basketball game. 98. You said, we were talking before, you're like basketball.
Hmm.
You watch a basketball game. What is it? 98% of the game, you're dribbling the ball, right? Like, it's not that exciting. Dribble the ball. That's the basics. Real estate, dribbling the ball, making calls, calling sellers, calling buyers. 2% of the game, there's a 3-pointer or a slam dunk or whatever, right? And so that's real estate too. Like, 2% of the time, you're like, all right, close the deal. This went good, whatever it is. So get it obsessed and get happy with dribbling the ball, get good at dribbling the ball, you know?
So our last question, I saw you brought up some books along the interview. One of them was The Four Agreements, which I'm actually reading now. What's one book, movie, or even a life experience that has profoundly shaped your mindset or approach to success in real estate and life?
Many. There's so many, but the first one would be Think and Grow Rich. I think, just because that was just such a paradigm shift for my mind. 20 years ago. But I think lately it would be Four Agreements. I think, and the good thing about that book is it's not like, oh, let me read it and okay, I've got everything I need to know. I think the good thing about that book is you read it. By the way, I got that from Tom Brady years ago, right? 2018, I forgot what it was, right? But he, I guess, was passing out to his teammates, to players he really like, respected, admired, to read the book. So I was like, yo, if Tom Brady wants or can read this and wants people to read this, I'll read this. And it was just, I was shocked by like how simple it is, but also how easy it is to implement. And so I think the point is with that book, like, read it regularly, but then apply it, because I think the golden nuggets there are like when you live your life and apply the principles as you're living it, and then read it again, right, and then read it 6 months later, and and it's so impactful to every area of your life. It really does give you, it's a good framework to how to think.
For sure. I'm on the last chapter right now. So far I love it. It's
Yeah,
straight to the point. You can apply it to everything, so I recommend that as well.
yeah.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing your journey, insights, and everything else you told us today. I'm sure our audience will take a lot away from this conversation. Before we wrap up, how can our audience and our investors connect with you and learn more about you and Festival Properties?
I mean, just find me on Facebook. I use Instagram too. Very rarely, though. I actually don't use social that much, but I'm on Facebook. I do have that one. Other than that, I'm busy living my life. I've got 3 dogs, 2 kids, and then between this business, that takes up all my time in a joyful way. But you can find me.
For sure. Thank you, Mark.
Or appreciate it, man. Thank you.